So Joanne, welcome, and you're already on stage.
Great, thank you very much. Great.
Everybody, welcome. They're getting up for coffee, so.
That's okay. So welcome to the session. I'll just quickly introduce myself, Joanne Charlie, Chief Marketing Officer at Neural Impact. And just a little bit of what might be of interest to you to take away from this session about what I can bring in is I've had about a 30-year marketing specialization. So I've worked in industry for 30 years in all sorts of fast-moving technology companies as well as some other companies, and I bring offers to market. So I spent all that time looking at sales and marketing processes, how to capture customers, engage interest, and accelerate that through in the fastest way possible. Additionally, I have been working for Neural Impact for the last several years, and we work exclusively in the Microsoft ecosystem of partners. So I work with partners all around the world of all different shapes and sizes, all different types of partners, and it's a maniacal focus on how to maximize the efficiency and the outcomes in terms of accelerating sales and marketing, so collecting customers. And I also work in Canadian universities. I teach marketing and I do a lot of research around neuroscience. So bringing the latest in how our brains work and what impact that has when we apply it to a B2B buyer environment. So how to bring that kind of learning in to help different companies be able to change their marketing and sales processes to engage customers and prospects much more quickly, and then how do we move them through that buying cycle in an accelerated way for a maximum outcome. So it's a little bit about what I do, and I'll overlay some of that neuroscience, that brain science, through this presentation today. So what we're going to look at is it's going to be a 5-step process, and we're looking at how to package, price, and bundle offers. Now, this is the most resistant exercise or work that I personally do with all the partners and all different companies around the world. There's a lot of resistance to publishing priced and bundled offers online. So if you don't yet do that, you're not alone. So we're going to work through sort of 5 key steps today. We're going to look at building a strong core offering. And I know that Carl Palachuk, how many of you went to his session yesterday? We're here for that. Right. Great. So we are not going to spend too much time there because he had a whole session there. So I'm just going to leverage some of the things that Carl was talking about. And then we'll move next to the next step, which is mapping your core offer to business value. So I'm going to try to show you ways to align your core offering so that it is receptive, so that it resonates with your prospect marketplace. So I'll show you a sort of methodology to anchor it into things that are actually going to capture your prospect's interest and that they've got an appetite to buy your solution. Then we're going to look at creating 3 bundled packages. And I'll show you some steps and some considerations on how to put those together, and how to differentiate meaningfully between the bundles to attract interest. And then next I'll look at pricing the bundle packages. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of pricing psychology here, just a few quick tips and tricks. And then next we'll go into persona messaging. So you've spent all this work creating these packages, bundling them, pricing, and now you have to capture some interest. You have to land on the right person who's going to see your message, who's in a position to purchase. And you've got to hook them in. So I'll talk very briefly around that. So before we get into those key steps, I want to mention some key factors to consider. We want to consider your buyer today. So what's their profile like, and how have they changed? And are you changing to meet how they're buying? And I want to talk a little bit about their buying behavior as well, because they have significantly changed in the last several years. So if we look at today's buyer, they're characterized by being highly anonymous. They try and stay out of your crosshairs as much as possible. They research independently. They ask their peers and their social networks for recommendations. They do everything but come to you. And often they don't make themselves known to upwards of about, especially for a simplified solution, about 85% of the way they are through the buying cycle before you even know about them. So you will not find them before they find you. So they're highly educated, they have got their own networks to use for recommendations, they want to stay anonymous as long as possible, they're risk adverse, they're looking for solutions out of the box, and they're looking for you to be an expert. They don't want to pay to educate you. So they're looking for all of these kinds of things, and in their journey they want useful information before they contact you. And their buying behavior is changed because their personal buying is now reflected in their business buying. So who's got Netflix here? Who buys Netflix? Who of us? Yeah. So we go online, we look at some well-defined packages, we've got some choices, it's very transparent in the pricing, we choose one, we buy with it, we go with it immediately. Well, increasingly how we buy in our personal lives is translated into how we want to buy in terms of business. So your business buyer wants to buy in this way too. They want transparency, they want clarity. So if they happen to contact you towards the end of their buying cycle, they pop up and maybe you don't have your price on your published web property, so they've come in and they've said, how much? And they hear, it depends. It depends on this, it depends on architecture, it depends on size and location, and how many people, and your operating systems, and it depends. How long is a ball of string? It's like the kiss of death. It depends, gets everyone's hackles up. People start to think about risk, and they've got control issues, and they start to think like, it shouldn't be this hard. These guys should be the experts. And when you say it depends and you don't have something that's definitive or a definitive range, all the sort of hackles go up and the red flags go up. And that's exactly what we don't want towards that or anywhere in the purchasing cycle. So your buyer wants someone that's in control, that's showing that they're an expert, and can start a conversation within a definitive range. So when you answer it depends versus, well, I'll need to dig down a little bit more, but what you've explained, we find that 90% of the time the price will range between $10,000 and $20,000. Is that within your range of expectations? Now that's a conversation. So that's what we need to get to. Another thing is we want to get away from time and materials to packaged offers. So we've done a really great job in the last few years of training our buyer to break down our price based on transactional things or an hourly rate. And so we've created an excellent master-servant relationship. They crack the whip and demand to know what our breakdown is by hour or transaction, and we do a really good job of serving that up, much to our detriment. So we need to really think about this new buyer. They're a business buyer, and they're focused on business outcomes. So we need to sell to business outcomes. People buy based on business outcomes, not based on an hourly rate, etc. So we've got to change the way that we're serving up our pricing. And one way to do that is to create bundled offers. So we give them a bundled offer based on an outcome that they want, that's based on our expertise and value pricing. Get them to identify the outcome they want, and we can deliver this in this kind of way, this quickly, with this level of expertise. People pay for that, and they pay for that in a bundled price, and that's value pricing. And we find that there's no upside to creating this cost plus pricing. You know, you're out there. Who creates proposals here for their customers? Yeah, a lot of you. They're one by one, they take time, they're usually unique, and they cost a lot of money, they slow down the sales cycle, and they can't scale for the cloud purchase and the way you need to grow in the cloud. So studies have shown that creating one-off proposals, overall you're leaving upwards of 56% of revenue on the table, because you simply don't know with a one-price option, if you win the deal, you don't know by how much. So there's some opportunity money left on the table. Now, if you lose, then you don't know how much you lost by. Maybe there was just a little bit of massaging you could have done to win that deal. So proposals end up costing you 50% of your revenues on average. So it's not a way that we recommend going. And packaged solutions help you save time. They lower the cost of customer acquisition. They can scale. They prevent you from chasing silly sales cycles out there. They pre-qualify your buyer. So the quality of lead is a lot higher. So we think about taking bundled offers to market. So another thing I want to talk about is our first step, which is defining the core offering. And as a lot of you came to Carl's session, this was the core bundle he was using as a straw man. And it's one that you're probably very familiar with, that has a lot of the components in the managed services, especially for smaller businesses that you target. So there is a core offer out there that's published on the website, and it could look something like that if it's similar to what your offering is. So I'm going to assume that this is a reasonable core offer. Now, if you don't have a core offer, and this doesn't resemble you, one of our recommendations and we've worked with lots of clients throughout the world, is go back for a time period, maybe 18 to 24 months, and have a look at all your your won proposals over that time period, and do an analysis. Put them into 3 buckets and look at if there's any natural tiering, and there usually is, with the 3 levels of deals that you win most often. And start to break down and do an analysis of the parameters and the core elements that go into each offer. And that's a natural starting place for you to look to determine your core bundles. So, but I'm going to move on and assume that a lot of you think that this is a reasonable core bundle. Am I correct in that? Does that resemble something that you have worked with in the past and maybe is something that you offer out there? Yeah? Okay, great. So the next step is that, yes, you've spent a little time within your internal teams, you've created a bundle, you've done some sort of navel gazing, and you think that this bundle is a great bundle. So I want to just sort of flip your thinking here a bit, is that your customer, they don't wake up in the morning and say, today's a good day that I'm going to go out and spend $20, $50, $100,000 on a new IT solution. They don't wake up thinking that they're going to move to the cloud or transform their business. We think that they might do that, but that's absolutely not what they're doing. Your small business owner, your person that's running a line of business, what cranks their wheel, what they wake up with, is what went wrong. What happened in my business today? Did I lose a customer? Did I lose a bid? Have I just done a project where I've actually got negative margins? Did I just get hacked? Did I have a takeover? These are the things that your customers are motivated by. Things to do with money and loss and risk and greed and being out of control. That's the motivation for them to come and seek your goods, your offers, your solutions. So when we think about aligning an offer, you want to make sure that it's anchored in their world. So what was the operational business challenge that your prospects face most often? That's where you start with your bundle. So can you answer the question of what's the operational limitation? What is the challenge that they're focusing? And then what do they want to do about it? What capability don't they have now that they need from you? And then you can create your core bundle, right? So over here we see that your core bundle is obviously made up of product elements, managed services, and maybe a bit of project services. So if we anchor this example in a real customer issue that many of you may have, we'll anchor this example in professional services. How many of you have professional services as a customer segment? Yeah, a few of you have that. You know that maybe it's a small accounting firm or a bunch of lawyers, consultants, and so their problem is their teams can't communicate in a secure environment, they can't collaborate or operate from field locations. My lawyers need to be on site. They're signing contracts here or there. My accountants go out into different operating units and different places. They work remotely. They might work from home. They may not even be in my city. So as an owner of the business, I need secure remote access. It's something I don't have right now. And so then what's the offer that meets this business challenge? Because that's what your prospect is coming to you and asking for. They're not coming over here and saying, I'd like to have Microsoft 365. I'd like to have this, that, the other. They mightn't even speak that language. They speak this language. You put together an offer that addresses their operational things, the things that keep them up at night, the things that they open their wallet for. So then you put your offer together. So I presume that you've already created your offer with Carl. So now I want you to look at this model two ways. If you haven't created your offer, I want you to think about moving from left to right in terms of coming up with, well, what would a solid offer look like for my priority target market? What are they grappling with? Now, how many of you have a solid offer out there already? Okay, so a few of you have. So this model still works, but I would challenge you to think backwards here. Think from right to left. Okay, I've got my offer. This is what I'm playing with out in the market and looking for a response from. So line it up here and then work it backwards. Is it rooted in an operational business challenge that resonates with the majority of my market and that they have an appetite to pay real money for? So I want you to take 5 minutes. It's your turn right now. We're doing this interactive session, and I want you in your workbooks to create your offer. Create your sweet spot offer that you know that there is market demand for, that is your priority segment, and test it in this little model. Is it actually, does it answer a real issue out there and a real pain? Does it have someone who's willing to open their wallet to purchase based on these couple of questions? So I'll give you just a quick couple of minutes and see what you come up with. Either start from left to right, or if you've got an offer, write your offer out and then test it for impact. Okay, so a couple of minutes. Oh, thinking music. Music to work by. This is their problem. So this is what they can't do. What do they want to do? Yeah. Okay, so I just sort of did a quick wander and I was very heartened because most people were working from right to left. From left to right. You were working on your limitations and what you could bring to the market and then creating the elements. And as a marketer, that's music to my ears. Because in my experience, and I don't know where Bridget is in the room. Bridget Roy, are you here? She just stepped out. Well, as a marketer, who else is a marketer in the room? Any other marketers here? So often our dilemma is we work with very technically passionate people. Often the companies we work for are founded by technologists. And they're all about this, all the great ways we can build the best mousetrap. And so they bring very clever solutions and they throw it over the fence to the marketers and it's here. Go out and find it, go market this, and to the salespeople, go and sell it. But unless it's rooted in where the demand is, where people actually have an appetite to find a solution and spend money, it's going nowhere. It could be very clever and technically fantastic, but unless there's a problem, unless it's aligned to business value, it's not going to be a success. So I'm really happy to see that a lot of you worked from the left and went right, because that's the magic in this. And if you happen to have an offer out there, I'm not sort of saying that's the wrong way to go, but I would ask you to then work backwards and find out whether really it is rooted in something that's viable and that there's some demand for. And that's super important for success. So I'll move on quickly because we're only sort of at step 2. I want to talk about psychological reactants. So a number of you said that you create proposals. And they take a lot of time and they take a lot of energy. And after you've finished your proposal, you're usually pretty proud of yourself. It's taken a couple of weeks and you hand that over to the client and what do? They take it and they go and they look straight at what? The price, right? So after all your hard work, they go straight to the price. And so you're right into a conflict right then and there. It's a negotiation. Someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. Human beings do not like being backed in a corner, do not like one option only. It's called a psychological reactant. It's like this little girl's face. It's like, what? It's like when you go to who went to the Habs game? Who's gone to a Habs game? Okay? Now, actually, I'll leave that analogy for something later. It's like if you walk into a room, say this room, And there's only one seat left on table 3, right at the front here. It's the best seat in the house. You get to look at me close up. Could be good or bad. And you get to see the screen. You hear everything. It's the best seat in the house, but it's the only one left. You kind of like, as a human being, we're like, ugh, I want to be able to choose my own, option here. And that's not in my control anymore. So that's what we do when we hand them a proposal or just one choice. So we want to give people choice, but not too many. If we give too many, it also has a reaction to us. Too many means I've got too many choices. Cognitively, that starts to overload the brain because we think that there's too many options with too many outcomes and too many risks. And so confronted with too much choice, we shut down, we walk away, or we delay a purchase. So it's kind of a little bit like Goldilocks. We've got to get it just right. And we propose that 3 options are just right. A quick and simple package, a moderate one, and then a fully customized and complex one. So you give them choice and give them the basis for their self-identification. So with clear parameters, it gives a degree of control back to your customer who likes that as a human being. So the next step is to create 3 bundles. And I want to sort of talk about the segmentation of your marketplace, your customer buyers. It's kind of analogous to the camera market. So when we look at a camera market, we see that we've got 3 different options here. At the very high end, we've got the SLR camera. Who here owns one of these very custom high-end? So a couple of people, right? They're expensive, am I right? They come with lots of bells and whistles and features and functionality. They often take a long, long time to learn how to use properly. And the person who buys that wants the very highest quality, customized options. They want to be in, their emotional desire is for control. They want to control their filters. They want to have interchangeable lenses and apertures and light and all the conditions. And so that's a small part of the market, but a valid part of the market. They're prepared to learn how to use it. Could take a lot of time and energy, and they're prepared to pay a lot of money for those cameras. Next, we see the regular sort of digital camera. And here, the emotional driver behind that is really a desire. It's a desire for a quality that's better than most people have. Yes, I'll pay a bit of money. I will put in a certain amount of moderate effort to be able to use it. And I'll pay a little bit of a premium for that. I want some sophisticated features. And then we have the iPhone. Who takes most of their photography or photos on iPhones in the room? Yeah, a much larger proportion than the SLR. So this is an emotionally driven by the need for simplicity. This is ease of use. This is about expediency, up and running quickly, takes no time to learn how to use. It's bundled in with my phone, so don't really want to pay much or extra for it. And I don't really invest any time in using my iPhone filters, etc., etc. So you too must consider developing sort of 3 different types of offers to suit what is suitable for your buyer spectrum. They fall into different discrete kinds of tiers. And then the tiering itself, when you're creating these tiers, versioning, it has to be a way to capitalize on a broader range of segments that you're going after. So we know that having different offerings generate 56% more revenues. So buyers are fine with tiers. And I asked the question before, who goes to a Habs game or who's been to a Habs game? So do you expect to pay the same for your seat if you're up in the nosebleeds as opposed to down by the ice? Absolutely not. You understand that there's different pricing depending on where you're positioned. and it's clear to you what the parameters in the price tiers are. So same when you create price tiers for your bundle, you have to create them in a way that makes sense for your customers. Microsoft and probably your other vendors, they charge you differently for the same technology that they're selling to all the other partners. But we understand that. We understand it's on the basis of usage or volume or something like that. So when you're creating your different packages and your tiers, remember to understand what makes sense. Your customers are prepared to pay different tiers, but it has to make sense to how they buy. So they might want to purchase licensing and services based on hours or consumption or user number, or maybe it's the type of user. They're willing to pay more for a heavy user versus a light user. Maybe they are happy to pay per device or per location. So think about what makes sense in terms of your tiering parameters. They have to be clear, easily understood, and on a basis that's equitable and that people are okay with. So that depends on your buyer group. So next we have packaging 3 offers, and we recommend that there are 3, that you have your lower end, low cost, low touch, easy entry. We suggest that at the other end of the spectrum, you have your fully loaded, fully customized, very expensive SLR camera. This is the one that is only used by maybe 10% of your customer base. And it's sort of like a menu at a restaurant, right? We have the cheap end, and there's a bit of resistance to the cheap end. I don't want to be perceived as cheap, and maybe the cheaper meal doesn't seem like it's going to give me all that I need. There's a bit of risk there. There's a bit of resistance because it's cheap. That's how we think as human beings. There's a lot of people that will not pay top dollar. They don't need top dollar. They don't see themselves as being freewheelers like that. But there are some special snowflakes at that end that you want to price for. So I want to draw your attention to the middle. The middle option is where you should be putting your core bundle. This is where you put the most effort. Our brains like to be balanced. And when we're given choices, the brain always opts to the safe middle. So your safe middle has got to be economically and visually the one that you want to direct most of your 85% of your sweet spot and your marketplace to, is the safe middle. This is where you do most of your projects. These are the ones that you're getting your most return, your highest margin for. So you want to direct everyone into that. We call it the sweet spot. In the psychology, it's called the center stage effect. So can you notice anything that draws your eye to the center choice? What do you notice? Okay, there's some colors, there's some visual eye candy. We process, most of our processing senses are in our eyes. Most of our cognitive processing is done through visual. So we often see this, that the middle option, the center stage, is the one that's drawn to because it's colored differently. It has, call outs to it. It says here, most popular. Those are the kinds of things that you want to do around your middle option. It's the one you make the most money to. It's the one you call attention to. And, we have a herd mentality. Our brains don't like to work too hard, right? So if someone says it's a safe option, that this is the one that's most chosen, well, I'm going to trust in that herd mentality. Someone else has done the research. This is the one I go to. So that's a little bit of a psychology around creating your packages. It's the high profit, high margin. It attracts the most attention visually. It's your center stage. This is the one that you're going to focus on. But that's not to say that you can't think strategically about the other 2 offers. So your entry point is not an afterthought. In the last, in this slide, you see that it's quite common for people to have free or freemiums. It doesn't have to be that way. It can just be a low dollar entry point. And you've got to think strategically, this option is going to be your pipeline of the future. So here you've got to think about a low cost, low touch, or even a no touch option. It gives them some value, maybe on, for one user, or maybe a read only, or whatever it is, if it's a freemium model, supported by FAQs or online forums or something like that. So it's for attracting your pipeline of the future, and it's for the customers that can't afford you now, but they're going to be biased towards you when they're ready to buy. So as their business increases, then they're going to be your high margin customer of tomorrow. So you have to create something that's of meaningful value. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is naming conventions. Gold, silver, bronze, light, standard, premium. These work for us, but they do not work for customers. Customers look for naming conventions that reflect who they are, or the situation, or describe the business they're in. So avoid things and tiering names that do not resonate with your customer. Think of instead how they like to be thought of. And the other thing here is that, you may not get this right out of the box. We worked with a client in the Netherlands, actually, and they put together 3 offers. And once they published it, they found that 90% of their interest came from their really high-end offer. And they were like, what? And so they quickly reconfigured. It was a law of unintended consequences. They found out that there was a much larger market than they ever thought possible out there that wanted a whole bunch of upmarket things that they hadn't thought was their true core offering. And so after a while, a few implementations, they created the high-end custom SLRX camera became their middle option. So again, you may not get this right coming out of the gate immediately, but maybe there is some upside. For this company they had much larger clients, higher margins, and a bigger market than they ever thought of. So your turn now. Spend 2 minutes and develop this low cost, low value. What can you strip out of your core offering that provides some value for that pipeline of tomorrow that you could execute on, that doesn't take a super duper amount of effort, but it positions you for the future? So maybe just 2 minutes, and then I'll proceed with step 4 and 5. Okay, I might let you just leave it there because I've got about 5 minutes left and I want to get through a couple of really interesting and couple of good points that you can apply in the next 2 steps. So the next step is all about pricing your bundles. And as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that your bundles have two emotional anchors in terms of low end and high end, but you also want to anchor those financially as well. So you have to think about what's going to be good value and focus your customer into the offer that you want them to buy, which is your middle one. So think about the price differences between your low, sweet spot, and customized offer. There has to be meaningful difference to drive them to the middle option that represents the best value for them. So making sure that you've got a reasonableness in your offer that's different between these, and I would argue that this is not a reasonable enough meaningful difference. So think about what would work with your customers. Another thing in terms of pricing psychology that you want to perhaps think about and integrate is numbers that end in 9. Psychologically, when we see something that's $9.99 as opposed to $10, the $9.99 seems to us psychologically much closer to $9 than $10, even though there's a cent difference, and we don't even have a cent in Canadian currency. They're essentially the same number, but our brain does something different when it reaches psychological levels. It ratchets down. It sees $9.99 as different to 10. So that's why you see a lot of pricing that ends in 9. It works. So think about integrating that in. And the other thing to think about is what we call the primacy effect. That means our brains put a lot of attention to the first digit, not so much to the next digit, and even less to the digits that follow that. So if you've got a price that's, say, $159, our brain spends a lot of time processing the 100, little bit less on the 50, and even way less on the 9. So if you're offering prices like $129, $169, $189, the brain is thinking in the hundreds. It's not so much focused on the 29, the 59, or the 89. But for us, there's a big difference if we charge $129 to $189. There's a lot of margin there for us. So that's something else to think about, is that we read left to right, and our brains spend the most time cognitively processing the first figure. So there's a couple of quick little hooks in terms of pricing psychology to think of. And this is where we get a lot of resistance as well in terms of pricing. It's like, well, I can't come at a definitive number. $39, $59, $5,000. I'm too scared to experiment with those numbers. Well, if you're resistant and you haven't done enough cost analysis, if you haven't done enough implementations to know that this is a range that you're comfortable with, it doesn't mean that you don't publish a price at all. Because as we've said, without a published price, you leave the buyer to go, why are they withholding the number? Are they not expert enough to know that what the number should be? You could instead put some things up there like starts from. This package is from $50 to $100 a user. It could be starts as low as $39. Or it could be, this is a very complex high-end project. Contact us for more details. So that is better than not having a price at all, and is a softer way to get into pricing if you're very risk adverse. But it still gives customers an idea of the ball game, right? And it still stops all those really low-end leads that haven't pre-qualified in a way. Another thing to think about when you're putting pricing packages together is to keep things as simple as possible. Our brains like simplicity. When you force your customer's brain or your brain to think, it becomes a lot more analytical. When your brain is a lot more analytical, it thinks about things a lot more harshly. It's hard to get things past an analytical brain. So when you keep things simple, you keep the brain sort of humming along, not putting too much processing power. We like to store our energy cognitively because we're evolved that way. We're evolved to fight or flee. So we want to make things simple for the brain. And one of the ways we do that is a simply, beautifully presented pricing pack. So do not resist the temptation to have a laundry list of options there. Keep it between 5 and 7 key critical elements underneath. And the reason is the human brain can only keep between 5 and 7 chunks of information in its short-term memory at a time. Anything over that, we just keep throwing it off the back end. So if you're going to present your pricing, do it simply, no more than 7 elements on the screen. If you really do need to dig down, you can have that sort of more detail button or a call out, or it can, they can scroll over and it can break out a few more things. But present it simply and easily. So you can take your turn to price the 3 bundles. You've got your workbook. You can do that in your own time. But the last thing I want to talk about is persona messaging and engagement. So you've created these great bundles. You're going to publish them all. You've priced them at a great level that you think it's got to get a lot of interest. And next, you need to be able to position and communicate in a way that hooks your buyer. At the beginning, I talked about these anonymous buyers who find you before you find them. In reality, you've got 8 seconds to hook them on your website. That's 1 second less in terms of attention of a goldfish. That's all you've got before they go on to the next offer, the next vendor that's in their organic search. So you need to be able to talk their language and talk to your key buyer. And we look at key buyers in 3 dimensions: the how buyer, the why buyer, and the what buyer. And I would guarantee you, you're probably like the majority of clients we see all around the world that are technology-based. Their what buyer is their IT end-user buyer. So your websites are full of features and functionality and technical jargon, et cetera. So where we would like you to start thinking about changing your messaging is to capture the how and the why people. Because the people that are writing the checks, the ultimate sign-off to come to your company is going to be the small business owner, the executive, or the leader of an operational unit. They're the why and the how people. You've got to create messaging for them. So the why person is the owner. He's the executive. He's writing the checks. He only cares about money, risk, control, loss. That's his language. That's what you've got to talk to these prospects in, that language, not in bits and bytes and, antivirus this or whatever. You've got to talk about the impact on their business. Now, and they have a different way of looking at materials that are going to hook them in. They've got smaller attention spans. The how person, again, if you've got a small business, often your, owner or chief executive is probably going to be operationally looking after things in the small business. They're going to be a leader, but they're also going to have functional unit responsibility. And so that's the how person. They drive efficiency and operational productivity. They're usually in charge of a certain area within an organization. So they're looking at language that talks about operational productivity and effectiveness. So I would say that you as your profile is going to be somewhere between the how and the why. And so how do you speak to them, and what is the red flags in their world? Well, I want to leave you with a tool that you can go and use, and it's found at this URL, and it's a persona generator. So it asks you and automatically asks you a dozen questions about who is buying your solution. right? And it will take your answers and it will create a guide for you on what that persona profile will look like. A lot of the bigger companies that we work with, well, they have all three personas. And then we create a persona mapping for them to go through on their websites so that they can get to information that's pertinent to them very quickly. But you probably have more simpler requirements where you are looking maybe at the why or the how persona. So it's a great tool so that you can get your messaging out. I mean, the landscape is littered with the best technology and the best mousetrap out there that no one's ever heard of, because you're not using the right hooks to engage your prospects within that 8 seconds of coming to your website. This will help you be able to craft more impactful, resonating messages. So I just want to sort of end today with talking about what we've got out, or hopefully what you've got out of today. The key learnings that why this bundling, packaging and pricing is important. It's because you want to build trust and transparency with bundled offers. You want to create a positive bias towards you and choosing you. You want to be able to stand out in that searcher's potential buyer prospect's mind, have recall and memory and bias towards you. The next thing is it engages prospects quickly and with authority. So you're showing that you're the experts and you're creating trust and transparency by putting these packages up that are tried and tested. Then you want to make it easy for them to buy. So they've got busy lives. They want to make decisions to help them align with their operational challenges, and you want to make it easy for them to commit to you, and packages do that. And you want to earn more. Who here doesn't want to earn more? You all want to earn more. You want to be able to do this in a repeatable fashion that's value priced. You want to get paid for what you're worth, not for one of the, counting down by hours or transactions. So packages that are priced and bundled correctly allow you that repeatability, that scalability. It allows you to lower your cost of customer acquisition. It enables you to avoid those fruitless, silly sales cycle. And overall, it's going to increase your revenues and, more importantly, your profits. So that's it from me today. I hope you've picked up a few tips that maybe you can take away and integrate into some of your processes. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Joanne. That was excellent. We're going to have to skip the Q&A session, however, and just welcome our next speaker.